On November 14th, 1979, Gary Novak punched his time card at Kellner Aluminum for the 11 to 7 shift. Third shift maintenance, same as he'd worked for 9 years. At 2:47 a.m., the pump house monitoring station recorded a carbon monoxide spike. At 3:15, second shift foreman Dale Kepler found Novak face down on the concrete floor, skin already cooling. The county coroner ruled it accidental death within 72 hours. Equipment malfunction. Case closed before the week ended. But the coroner never explained why the pump house ventilation system had been manually disabled from outside the building, or why Gary Novak's locker had been emptied before his body was discovered, or why his widow received a life insurance check for triple the policy amount, postmarked the day before he died. The archive room at Ohio State's Industrial History Center smelled of aging paper and institutional coffee. Dr. Margaret Weiss had spent 31 years documenting the decline of American manufacturing, but the Kellner aluminum file had sat untouched in her cabinet for the past 8. She'd collected it during routine fieldwork in 1992, interviewing retired steelworkers about union organizing. One name kept surfacing in those conversations: Gary Novak. Always mentioned in lowered voices, always followed by silence. Weiss pulled the manila folder from its drawer and spread the contents across her desk. Photocopied incident reports, a faded newspaper clipping, 3 cassette tapes labeled in her own handwriting from interviews she barely remembered conducting.
I never followed up. Thought it was just factory floor gossip.
She loaded the first tape into the department's ancient player and pressed play. The tape hissed with age. A man's voice emerged, thick with cigarette damage and the flat vowels of northeastern Ohio. Tape. Earl Pruitt. Kellner wasn't a bad place to work. Not compared to some. But there were things you didn't ask about. Things that happened on third shift. Weiss, 1992 recording. What kind of things? Tape. Earl Pruitt. Gary Novak asked questions. That's all I'm saying. Weiss, 1992 recording. About what? Tape. Earl Pruitt. Ma'am, I worked there 34 years. I got my pension. I got grandkids. The recording clicked off. Weiss checked her notes from that interview. Earl Pruitt had been a furnace operator, retired in '88. The address she had was in Lorain. She reached for the phone book. The Pruitt house sat on a street of identical ranch homes, aluminum siding weathered to the color of old bone. A woman in her 70s answered the door, her face guarded behind the screen.
Mrs. Pruitt? I'm Dr. Margaret Weiss from Ohio State. I interviewed your husband about Kellner Aluminum back in '92. Earl passed in '04. I'm sorry, I didn't know. Mrs. Pruitt. What do you want? I'm researching the death of Gary Novak. Your husband mentioned his name in our interview.
Something shifted behind the woman's eyes. She glanced past Weiss toward the street, a reflex that looked decades old. Mrs. Pruitt. Earl didn't talk about Gary. Not to me. Not to anyone.
He talked to me. On tape. Mrs. Pruitt. Then you heard enough.
Weiss sat in her rental car, engine running against the November cold. The Pruitt interview had yielded nothing but a closed door. But Mrs. Pruitt's fear had been real. 30 years later, the mention of Gary Novak still made her check the street. Weiss pulled out her research file and scanned the list of Kellner employees she'd identified. Most were dead or untraceable. 3 lived within driving distance. She circled the first name. Dale Kepler, the man who found the body.
Second shift foreman. Retired to Illyria in '91.
She pulled away from the curb, watching Mrs. Pruitt's face in the rearview mirror. The old woman stood at her window, telephone already pressed to her ear. Dale Kepler lived in a duplex behind a strip mall that had seen better decades. He was 78 years old, his handshake still firm from years of machinery work. His living room smelled of menthol cigarettes and old carpet.
Gary Novak. Hell of a thing.
You found him.
Found what was left. Carbon monoxide doesn't leave much expression on a man's face.
The incident report says you discovered the body at 3:15 a.m., but your shift ended at 11.
I stayed late. Paperwork.
4 hours of paperwork?
Kepler's jaw tightened. He reached for his cigarettes with hands that trembled slightly.
I don't remember every detail from 45 years ago, Mom. Man's dead. Coroner said accident. What else is there to know?
The ventilation system was disabled from outside the pump house. Someone had to do that manually.
Equipment fails. Things break.
The incident report doesn't mention any equipment failure. It says the system was switched off.
Then the report's wrong.
You signed that report, Mr. Kepler.
Silence filled the room. Outside, a car alarm started and stopped. Kepler stubbed out his cigarette and immediately lit another.
I signed what they put in front of me. Same as everyone else.
Who's they?
Mom, I think you should go now.
Mr. Kepler.
I said what I'm going to say. Gary's dead. Let him stay buried.
Weiss drove east toward Cleveland, the steel mill glow painting the horizon orange through her windshield. Her second cassette tape played through the rental car's speakers. Another voice from 1992. Tape. Ruth Cernak. My husband worked with Gary. Same crew for 7 years. Weiss, 1992 recording. Did he ever talk about what happened? Tape. Ruth Cernak. He talked about it once, the night before he died. Weiss, 1992 recording. When was that? Tape. Ruth Cernak. 1980. Heart attack at 46. Doctor said it was stress. Weiss pulled over and rewound the tape. Ruth Cernak's husband had died less than a year after Gary Novak. She'd noted the address in her files. Maple Heights. She checked her watch. 2 hours of daylight left. The nursing home sat on a commercial strip between a payday loan office and an auto parts store. Ruth Cernak was 89, her memory sharp despite a body that had largely failed her. She sat in a wheelchair by the window, watching traffic pass.
You're the woman from the university, the one asking about Kellner.
You remember our interview?
I remember everything. That's my curse.
You told me your husband talked about Gary Novak the night before he died. What did he say?
Ruth Cernak's hands curled around the arms of her wheelchair. Her eyes stayed fixed on the window.
He said Gary found something he wasn't supposed to find. Something in the records.
What records?
The shipping logs. Third shift. Frank, my husband, he worked the loading dock. Third shift, same as Gary. They loaded trucks all night. Aluminum stock going out, raw materials coming in.
What was wrong with the shipping logs?
The weights didn't match. Gary noticed it first. Trucks going out heavier than the manifest said. Every night.
Heavier by how much?
Enough to matter. Enough to get a man killed.
Weiss leaned forward.
Mrs. Cernak, do you know what was in those trucks?
Frank never said. Just that Gary was going to report it. To someone outside the plant.
Who?
I don't know. But Frank said after Gary died, the weight discrepancies stopped. Like they'd never happened.
The Ohio State Library stayed open until midnight. Weiss sat in the microfilm room, scrolling through Lorain County newspapers from November 1979. The coverage of Gary Novak's death was minimal. A 3-paragraph item on page 8. Industrial accident claims local man. But 2 weeks later, a different story caught her attention. EPA fines Kellner Aluminum for emissions violations. She scrolled forward. The fine was $50,000, a slap on the wrist. But buried in the article was a detail that made her stop scrolling.
Kellner was under investigation for illegal dumping. The EPA suspected they were disposing of toxic waste through unauthorized channels.
She photographed the article and kept scrolling. The investigation had been dropped in early 1980. Insufficient evidence. Weiss called the EPA regional office the next morning. After 3 transfers and 40 minutes on hold, she reached an archivist who sounded like he'd been expecting to retire before anyone asked about Kellner Aluminum.
1979. That's deep storage. Give me a week.
I can drive to Cincinnati if that helps.
It won't. These files are in a warehouse in Columbus, if they still exist.
Why wouldn't they exist?
A long pause on the line.
Dr. Weiss, a lot of records from that era went missing during the Reagan transition. Budget cuts, consolidation, call it what you want.
But you'll look?
I'll look, but don't hold your breath.
While waiting for the EPA, Weiss returned to her original interview tapes. The third cassette was labeled simply Kellner, M-I-S-C. She didn't remember recording it. The voice that emerged was younger than the others, a woman speaking quickly, as if afraid of being overheard. Unworked in the front office, billing and payroll. Did you know Gary Novak? Everyone knew Gary. He was the one who asked why. Why what? Why the trucks left at 2 a.m. Why we kept 2 sets of shipping logs. Why the plant manager's brother-in-law had a trucking company that only ran at night. Why stopped the tape? She had no name for this voice, no address. Just a woman who'd worked in the front office at Kellner Aluminum in 1979. The Lorain County Recorder's Office was a limestone building that smelled of old documents and floor wax. Weiss requested corporate records for Kellner Aluminum from 1975 to 1985. The clerk, a tired-looking woman in her 50s, returned with a single cardboard box.
This is everything we have. Most of it's incorporation papers and property transfers.
Nothing about trucking contracts? Shipping agreements?
Those would be with the company, or destroyed when they close.
When did Kellner close?
1984. Bankruptcy. The whole plant got auctioned off.
Weiss opened the box and began sorting through yellowed documents. Near the bottom, she found a list of company officers from 1979. The plant manager was named Howard Kellner III. His brother-in-law, listed as a minority shareholder, was named Vincent Marsh. Vincent Marsh had died in 2001, according to the obituary Weiss found in the Plain Dealer archives. But his trucking company, Marsh Transport, still existed. The current owner was listed as Victor Marsh, Jr. Weiss found a business address in Willoughby. The next morning, she parked outside a chain-link fence surrounding a small fleet of semi-trucks. A man in his 60s emerged from a prefab office building, his face suspicious before she'd even stepped out of her car.
We don't do interviews.
I'm not a reporter. I'm a historian at Ohio State.
Same thing. Get off my property.
I'm researching the death of Gary Novak. Your father's company hauled freight for Kellner Aluminum in '79.
Something flickered across Marsh's face. Recognition. Fear. Then nothing.
My father's been dead 23 years. I don't know anything about Kellner.
Your father was Howard Kellner's brother-in-law. He owned a trucking company that ran night hauls from the plant.
So what? That's business.
A maintenance worker died on one of those nights. 3 weeks later, an EPA investigation got dropped.
Marsh stepped closer, his voice dropping.
Lady, you're digging in the wrong ground. My father ran a legitimate operation. Whatever happened at that plant, it didn't have anything to do with us.
Then why did the night hauls stop after Gary Novak died?
I don't know what you're talking about.
The shipping discrepancies, the weight differences. They stopped in December '79.
Marsh's face went still.
Get off my property. Now.
Weiss drove back to Columbus with her windows down, despite the cold. Victor Marsh Jr. had reacted to the shipping discrepancies like she'd pulled a gun. He knew something. Everyone she'd talked to knew something, but no one would say what. The EPA archivist called that evening while she was eating takeout in her office.
I found something. It's not much.
Anything helps.
The Kellner investigation file was transferred to the Department of Justice in January 1980. It never came back.
Why would the DOJ take an EPA file?
Only reason I can think of is if the case involved more than environmental violations. Fraud, racketeering, something federal.
Can you find out who authorized the transfer?
Already did. The signature's illegible, but the transfer order was countersigned by the Lorain County Sheriff's Office.
The Lorain County Sheriff in 1979 was a man named Carl Beckwith. He'd served 3 terms before retiring in '88. Weiss found his name in several newspaper articles from the era, always described as a friend to local business. Carl Beckwith had died in '96, but his son David had followed him into law enforcement. David Beckwith was now the county's chief deputy. Weiss called the sheriff's office and requested a meeting. The receptionist put her on hold for 11 minutes before coming back.
Chief Deputy Beckwith can see you tomorrow at 9. He says to tell you he's familiar with your research.
Weiss hung up slowly. She hadn't told anyone at the sheriff's office what she was researching. Chief Deputy David Beckwith had his father's jaw and his father's handshake. His office was neat, decorated with law enforcement commendations, and a family photograph that showed 3 generations of Beckwiths in uniform. He didn't stand when Weiss entered.
Dr. Weiss, I understand you're interested in ancient history.
I'm interested in Gary Novak.
Industrial accident, 1979. Before my time.
Your father countersigned the transfer of an EPA investigation file to the Department of Justice. The investigation was dropped shortly after.
Beckwith's expression didn't change, but his hand moved slightly toward a desk drawer.
My father countersigned a lot of things. That's what sheriffs do.
Do you know what was in that file?
No. And I'd advise you to stop asking.
That sounds like a threat, Chief Deputy.
It's advice. There are people in this county who remember what happened at Kellner. They don't want it remembered publicly.
People like who?
People with long memories and short patience for university professors asking questions.
Weiss leaned forward.
A man died. His locker was emptied before his body was cold. The ventilation system was deliberately disabled, and within weeks, every investigation into that plant was shut down. That's not ancient history, Chief Deputy. That's a cover-up.
Beckwith stood, his chair scraping against the floor.
This meeting is over. I'll have a deputy escort you out.
I'm going to find out what was in those trucks.
No, Dr. Weiss, you're not.
Weiss returned to Columbus and found a message waiting on her office phone. A woman's voice, elderly, speaking in the same quick cadence as the unknown voice on her tape.
Dr. Weiss, my name is Patricia Howell. I used to be Patricia Malloy. I worked at Kellner Aluminum until 1980. I heard you've been asking questions. I live in Mentor now. If you want to know what was really in those trucks, come see me, but come alone, and don't tell anyone where you're going.
Weiss played the message 3 times. Patricia Malloy. The voice on her tape had been young, frightened, whispering about 2 sets of shipping logs. 30 years later, she was finally ready to say more. Weiss grabbed her coat and car keys. Patricia Howell lived in a condominium complex that overlooked Lake Erie. She was 74 years old, her hair white, her hands steady as she poured coffee. The apartment was modest but neat, filled with photographs of grandchildren.
I kept quiet for 45 years, watched the newspapers, waited for someone to figure it out. No one ever did.
Figure what out?
What Kellner was really doing. What Gary Novak died for.
The shipping discrepancies, the weight differences.
That was just the start. Gary found the second set of logs in the plant manager's office. He made copies.
Do you know what happened to those copies?
Patricia Howell rose slowly from her chair and walked to a bookshelf. She removed a hollowed-out copy of Anna Karenina. Inside the hollowed book was a manila envelope, yellowed with age. Patricia handed it to Weiss with trembling hands.
Gary gave these to me the day before he died. He said if anything happened to him, I should get them to a reporter. But then he died, and I got scared. Everyone who knew anything got scared.
Weiss opened the envelope. Inside were photocopies of shipping manifests, covered in handwritten annotations. The weights on the official logs didn't match the weights on what appeared to be internal tracking sheets. The differences range from 500 to 2,000 pounds per load.
What accounts for the weight difference?
Drums. 55-gallon drums. They loaded them onto the trucks at 2 a.m. after the regular shift left.
What was in the drums?
I don't know, but I know where they went. There was an abandoned strip mine about 40 miles south. Kellner owned the land, bought it in '76 for back taxes.
They dumped toxic waste in a strip mine?
I didn't say that. I said I know where the trucks went. I followed one, once. after Gary told me what he'd found.
You followed a truck?
Middle of the night. I was young and stupid and angry. I watched them unload the drums into the pit. Dozens of them. Then they covered them with dirt and drove away.
Weiss stared at the shipping logs. 45 years of toxic waste, buried 40 miles from where she sat.
Why didn't you report this?
I tried. A week after Gary died, I called the EPA tip line. 3 days later, someone broke into my apartment. Nothing was taken, but they left a message on my mirror. In lipstick. One word.
What word?
Quiet.
Weiss drove back to Columbus with the shipping logs locked in her trunk. Her mind kept returning to the same calculations. The weight discrepancies indicated roughly 50,000 pounds of undocumented material per month. Over 3 years, that was nearly 2 million pounds of toxic waste, buried in an abandoned mine. The EPA had been investigating. The DOJ had taken the file. Someone had shut it all down. She called her department chair from the road.
I need a research leave. Effective immediately.
Margaret, what's going on?
I found something. Something big. I need time to document it properly.
This is about Kellner aluminum.
Weiss hesitated. She hadn't told anyone about her research.
How do you know about Kellner?
The provost's office called. They want to see you tomorrow morning. Something about a complaint from the Lorain County Sheriff's Office.
Provost was a man named Henderson, who'd spent his career avoiding controversy. He sat behind his desk with the expression of someone who'd rather be anywhere else.
Dr. Weiss, we've received the formal complaint alleging harassment and trespassing.
I'm conducting research into an industrial accident from 1979.
The complaint says you've been harassing private citizens and making unfounded accusations against local officials.
I've been asking questions. That's what historians do.
The sheriff's office has requested that we terminate your research and issue a formal apology.
Weiss felt something cold settle in her stomach.
And what do you intend to do?
I intend to protect this university. Your research leave is denied. You're to have no further contact with anyone connected to the Kellner case. Is that clear?
Weiss walked back to her office in a daze. Someone had made calls. Someone with enough influence to reach the provost of a state university within 24 hours. In her office, she found the door ajar. Her filing cabinet stood open, drawers pulled out. The Kellner folder was gone. The cassette tapes were gone. Her laptop was still there, but the hard drive had been removed. Only the shipping logs remained, locked in her car trunk where she'd left them.
Son of a bitch.
Her phone rang, unknown number.
Hello?
Dr. Weiss, you were warned.
Who is this?
Someone who remembers what happens to people who don't stay quiet. Let it go, Professor, while you still can.
Weiss didn't go home that night. She drove to a motel in Delaware, Ohio, paid cash, and spread the shipping logs across the bed. The anonymous voice on the phone had been male, older, with the same flat vowels as the other Lorain County voices she'd heard. Someone was protecting a 45-year-old secret. Someone with connections to law enforcement, local government, and a state university. She photographed every page of the shipping logs with her phone and uploaded them to a cloud server. Then she called the one person she thought might help.
Patricia? It's Margaret Weiss.
Dr. Weiss, I was hoping you wouldn't call again.
Someone broke into my office. They took everything except the logs.
Then they know you have them.
I need to know who's behind this. Who had the power to shut down a federal investigation?
Howard Kellner had friends everywhere. The sheriff, the county commissioners, state legislators who got campaign contributions.
Kellner's been dead since 1992.
But his friends aren't. His son runs a real estate development company now. Half the county commission used to work for Kellner Aluminum.
What about the brother-in-law, Vincent Marsh?
Marsh was the operator. Kellner gave the orders, but Marsh made things happen. He knew people in Cleveland, the kind of people who solve problems permanently.
You're saying organized crime was involved.
I'm saying Gary Novak found out that Kellner Aluminum was paying the Marsh family to dispose of toxic waste. And when he tried to report it, someone made sure he couldn't.
Who killed him?
I don't know. But I know who ordered it.
Howard Kellner Jr. operated out of an office building in Avon Lake. Weiss found his biography online. 62 years old, chairman of Kellner Development Group, major donor to local Republican candidates, married with 4 children, pillar of the community. She drove to Avon Lake the next morning and parked across from the office building. At 11:15, a silver Mercedes pulled into the reserved spot near the entrance. A man in his 60s emerged, silver-haired, prosperous-looking, wearing a suit that cost more than Weiss made in a month.
Howard Kellner Jr.
She crossed the street and intercepted him at the door.
Mr. Kellner, I'm Dr. Margaret Weiss. I'm researching the death of Gary Novak.
Kellner's face went pale, then it hardened into something cold.
I don't know who you are, but this conversation is over.
Your father's company dumped 2 million pounds of toxic waste in an abandoned strip mine. Gary Novak found the shipping logs that proved it. 3 days later, he was dead.
That's slander.
I have the logs, copies that Gary made before he died. They show weight discrepancies on every third shift shipment for 3 years.
Kellner's hand moved toward his pocket. For a moment, Weiss thought he was reaching for a phone. Instead, he pulled out a business card.
Contact my lawyers. If you publish anything connecting my family to criminal activity, I'll own whatever's left of your career.
Your father had a man killed to cover up illegal dumping. Someone needs to answer for that.
My father never killed anyone, and neither did I.
Weiss returned to her motel room and called Patricia Howell. The phone rang 12 times before going to voicemail. She tried 3 more times over the next hour. Nothing. At 6 p.m., she drove to Mentor. Patricia's condominium was dark. A neighbor was walking a dog in the parking lot.
Excuse me, have you seen Mrs. Howell today?
The lady in 4B? An ambulance came this morning, took her to the hospital.
What happened?
Heart attack, they said. She's been in good health, though. Seemed strange.
Weiss drove to Lake West Hospital. Patricia Howell had been admitted to the ICU. No visitors allowed. Weiss sat in the waiting room until a nurse told her visiting hours were over.
Are you family?
I'm a friend. Is she going to be all right?
You'll have to ask her doctor. He'll be in tomorrow morning.
Weiss slept in her car in the hospital parking lot. At 7 a.m., a doctor emerged from the ICU entrance. His name tag read, Dr. Paul Reeves.
Dr. Reeves, I'm here about Patricia Howell.
Are you family?
I'm the last person she spoke to before her heart attack. I'm also a researcher investigating a 45-year-old murder. Mrs. Howell was a witness.
Reeves looked at her for a long moment.
Mrs. Howell didn't have a heart attack. She was poisoned.
What?
Her blood work showed elevated levels of potassium chloride, enough to stop her heart. She's alive because her neighbor heard her fall and called 911 immediately.
Has anyone reported this to the police?
I called the sheriff's office this morning. They said they'd send someone. No one's come yet.
Weiss sat in her car, hands shaking. Patricia Howell had been poisoned within hours of their conversation about the shipping logs. Someone was monitoring her calls. Someone who would kill to keep a 45-year-old secret buried. She needed help. Real help. Not the Lorain County Sheriff's Office. She drove to Cleveland and walked into the FBI field office at noon.
Dr. Weiss, I'm Special Agent Torres. You said this involves a federal investigation from 1979?
The Department of Justice took an EPA file on Kellner Aluminum. The investigation was shut down. A witness was killed. And last night, another witness was poisoned.
That's a lot of accusations.
I have documentation. Shipping logs that prove illegal dumping. A timeline of the cover-up. And I can tell you who ordered it.
Torres leaned forward.
I'm listening.
Weiss talked for 2 hours. She laid out everything. The shipping discrepancies, the strip mine, Gary Novak's death, the EPA investigation that disappeared, the connections between Kellner, the Marsh family, and local law enforcement. Agent Torres took notes without interrupting.
Dr. Weiss, I need to be honest with you. Even if everything you're saying is true, the statute of limitations on most of these crimes expired decades ago.
A woman was poisoned last night.
That I can investigate, if local law enforcement won't.
And the illegal dumping?
Environmental crimes don't have a statute of limitations if there's ongoing contamination. If that strip mine is still leaching toxins into the groundwater, someone could still be prosecuted.
Then you need to test the site.
I need probable cause to test the site. What I have right now is a 45-year-old theory and some photocopied shipping logs.
I can give you probable cause. Patricia Howell told me she followed a truck to the dump site in 1979. She can identify the location.
If she survives.
She's going to survive. And when she wakes up, she's going to tell you everything she told me.
Torres stood and walked to the window.
Dr. Weiss, I've worked organized crime cases for 15 years. The pattern you're describing, the political connections, the cover-up, the violence against witnesses, that's not corporate malfeasance. That's something else.
What do you mean?
I mean, the Marsh family didn't just run a trucking company. Vincent Marsh had connections to Cleveland organized crime going back to the 60s. If Kellner Aluminum was using mob-connected haulers to dispose of toxic waste, this isn't just about dumping. It's about money. A lot of money.
3 days later, Patricia Howell woke up. Agent Torres was waiting in her hospital room. Weiss watched through the window as Patricia pointed at a map, marking locations, naming names. When Torres emerged, her face was grim.
She gave us the dump site. A federal team is heading there tomorrow.
What about Gary Novak?
Mrs. Howell says the order came from Howard Kellner Sr. Vincent Marsh arranged the details. They paid a night security guard named Ronald Dempsey to disable the ventilation system and empty Novak's locker.
Dempsey, is he still alive?
He died in 1983. Hunting accident.
Convenient.
Very. But here's the thing. Mrs. Howell says Dempsey wasn't the one who actually killed Novak. Someone else was in the pump house that night. Someone she saw leaving.
Who?
Dale Kepler, the man who found the body.
Dale Kepler was 78 years old. He'd spent 45 years believing no one would ever come asking. When Weiss and Agent Torres arrived at his duplex in Elyria, he was sitting on his front porch, smoking a cigarette, watching the street.
I figured someone would come eventually. Didn't think it'd take this long.
Mr. Kepler, we need to talk about Gary Novak.
I know what you need to talk about. I've been waiting to talk about it for 45 years.
He stepped out his cigarette and looked at Weiss.
You're the professor. The one asking questions.
Yes.
Gary was my friend. Best friend I ever had. And I killed him because Howard Kellner said my family would be next if I didn't.
Inside the duplex, Kepler spoke for 3 hours. He described how Kellner had approached him in October '79, offering money to keep quiet about the shipping discrepancies. When Kepler refused, Kellner mentioned his wife, his children, his elderly mother. The message was clear.
Gary found the second set of logs. He was going to the EPA. Kellner couldn't let that happen.
So he ordered you to kill him.
He ordered me to be there. Dempsey disabled the ventilation. I was supposed to make sure Gary stayed in the pump house until the carbon monoxide did its work. But Gary fought. He almost got out. So
His voice broke.
I held the door. I held it closed while my best friend died on the other side.
Why are you telling us this now?
Because I'm dying. Lung cancer. 6 months at most. And I'm tired of carrying it.
The federal investigation took 18 months. EPA teams excavated 2,000 drums of toxic waste from the strip mine site. Groundwater testing revealed contamination levels 40 times the legal limit, affecting 3 townships. Howard Kellner Jr. was indicted on environmental crimes, obstruction of justice, and accessory after the fact to murder. His lawyers negotiated a plea deal. He served 4 years in federal prison. Dale Kepler died before the trial. His confession entered into the record. The Lorain County Sheriff's Office was placed under federal oversight. Chief Deputy David Beckwith resigned. Dr. Margaret Weiss published her findings in the Ohio Historical Quarterly. The article was titled, "Shift Change at Kellner Aluminum, a 45-year cover-up." On the anniversary of Gary Novak's death, His widow Donna placed flowers at his grave for the first time in decades. She'd spent 45 years believing it was an accident. Now she knew the truth. It wasn't justice. Justice would have been Gary coming home that night. But it was something. For the first time in 45 years, someone had finally answered her questions.
The truth doesn't bring people back. It doesn't undo what was done. But it matters. It has to matter. Because if we stop believing that, then Gary Novak died for nothing. And I refuse to accept that.